Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Hi, it's Dr. Gemma. Welcome back. We are at episode 18 of Cognitive, and as I record this, it's Monday, March 8th at 10:24 a.m., and I hope everybody's doing well. It's nice to have you along for the ride as usual. Oh, let's get through the typical top of the notes stuff. You can comment on this episode or any episode right here on cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com, or you can go to our group on Ravelry. Either way, I'm trying to keep up with both and would love to have your comments. You can add yourself to our Cognitive Listeners Map. And you can follow my YouTube channel, creatively and inspirationally named Dr. Gemma, 2 words spelled out. On the YouTube channel, I have 1-minute flash tips about surviving the pandemic and also some longer discussions of the strategies I most frequently use in therapy, which, by the way, these really need to be updated because I've moved much more heavily into the area of dialectical behavioral therapy. Even so, they're good, and I hope they're worth the watch. So far, there will not be a cognitive fiber retreat this year. We've had some good interest in it, so now we're waiting for herd immunity to catch up. If we do a CFR, I don't believe we'll be doing it in Tehachapi, because I don't believe this same hotel would be available to us, but I'll probably look into it. The advantage of being in Tehachapi was the remoteness, and the hotel was picked specifically to be away from certain problematic elements that are often there on the weekend, which I'm not going to discuss further than that. But it worked out pretty well for us, and we had a good thing going with that hotel's manager. Unfortunately, he left. There was a problem one year with bed bugs, and that's also inspiring me to look at other facilities. But we shall have to see. It was a beautiful, remote kind of town that was easy to explore and to be in for many reasons. So we'll see. But if there's going to be a CFR, I'm going to be doing my homework on that. One of the easier choices would simply be a conference hotel in the Antelope Valley, which is remarkably ugly as locations go, but might have some advantages nonetheless and would be very accessible from airports. Anyway, I have no fixed ideas, and if we're going to do a CFR, any kind of suggestion would be welcome. Meanwhile, in the Warm Thanks department, thank you for Loopy Uniter. That was a really interesting post about the cookies. What Loopy U was saying was there's a lot of lousy keto cookie recipes out there. You betcha. You betcha. A lot of them taste like sawdust because they're using almond flour, which works great to make brownies, but not to make cookies that anybody wants to eat. So I'll tell you right now, Loopy Uniter, the secret is coconut flour. And also, I'll get to this later and put a lid on it, but also I can recommend a good cookbook, and that author believes in using powdered gelatin. So there we go. Anyway, let us move on, but thank you, Loopy Uniter. It was a good post. You're all wondering now, of course, what's on my hooks and needles, as well you may. Well, in the finished category, hooray, we have the Pines vest. Now, years ago, we all did a thing called vestuary. It was the shortest month, so we made the easiest sweater, I think was the logic there, or the shortest sweater. And I seem to be the only one in podcast land still observing vestuary, and I do, because it's a great excuse. It's like Socktober. It's a great excuse to specialize on one type of clothing that you're going to like and you're going to use. And this year, vestuary was really happy for me because 2 things happened. One was I started the vest for Twin Face, and I sent the first 2 skeins knitted up, bottom up to her, and they were ridiculously large on her through a misunderstanding about her chest size. So she still has to stick them back in the mail and then hand them to the Pony Express, because everything from the East Coast these days, seriously, might as well be Pony Express. I don't know why. California's mail seems to be working just fine, but the East Coast is really struggling there. At any rate, I realized that I still had 2 or 3 skeins of her yarn. This is an old stash dive, just a solid color, kind of bright salmon or coral, I guess you would call it. And I used it because the idea is Twin Face wants a sweater, and I am not committing to a sweater until I get her diameter through the chest correct, and I get a sense of how the sweater will fit. So a vest seems like a great idea because it'll give me an idea of the length, and it'll give me an idea of the chest size without committing to arm length. So one less place to mess it up. Also, once I have the vest done, then if I have to send her sweater back and forth to get the arms right, I'm okay with that. But what strikes me is once she has a vest, I now can make her gift sweaters, gift vests. And then once we move on to a sweater, for the rest of our mutual lives, I can be sending her sweaters, which she's really excited about. She's like, oh yeah, don't let me stop you. So the idea is get it right this first time by doing a lot of exchanges of the sweaters in progress. And I'm starting with a lower risk vest because if the sweater idea has not worked out by our mutual birthday in September, she'll at least be getting a vest, or maybe 2. And hopefully by Christmas, the sweater thing will be worked out. And then every year we can do a Twin Face sweater, and that would be a lot of fun. So, of course, that got me doing a vest for myself. Once I mailed off hers, I was sort of sitting around saying, well, no sweater to work on. And I really like always having some type of sweater on the needles because it's great for those long spells of listening to audiobooks when you just want to knit stockinette. And then they take relatively little finishing. So I put my own vest on the needles, as I've told you, and I finished it this week. And the Pines vest, this is following the pattern in Ann Budd's The Knitter's Handy Book of Patterns, which is, of course, a book of what are called monster patterns. That is, patterns that fit everybody. You just have to figure out the person's measurements and the gauge of your knitting. So this time I got it right. I could not get the sweater for 38 inches to work for me. Now I have a 40-inch chest and I wanted about that much ease. And it just was not working for me. So what I did instead was I did the sweater for the 40-inch chest, but I went down 1 needle size, and the difference that makes is really impressive. So I got a really good fit. So I have this nice formula now for fitting Ann Budd type sweaters to me, and I'm hoping it's going to work on Twin Face. So mine is finished. Hers is just past the ribbing. It's looking a little small. We'll see how that goes. You never can tell because when you've got the needles in the project and you're very close to the beginning, your project may look more the size of your needle length than its actual size. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, I like to have 4 projects on the needles. And now, of course, one at least likes to be a sweater. And one, of course, is always socks because you're always going to need them. There's going to be a time in life where I'm probably not knitting sock yarn. So I'm stocking up now with my whole sable stash. So in other words, what I'm saying is you can't have too many socks. And the ones I'm on now are the Spectrum socks in the beautiful colorway Roy G. Biv from Rock and String Yarn. And I'm really enjoying them. They are going to take a bath in the white vinegar solution before I try washing them because they're very bright. And I have never had a problem with Rock and String Yarn's dye jobs running. Never. Even so, I'm just going to be careful because these babies are bright. So I'm looking forward to that. We're past the heel insert, that is the waist yarn for the afterthought heel on sock 1, and we're very close to the toe. So these things just go really quickly. As I notice, striped socks tend to go quickly for me, and I'm having a great time. And of course, I used to like one of my projects to be lace because every now and then I need to break my brain, but now I think of it as enforced mindfulness. So I'm doing the Wild Lettuce Shawl, which, like all of her patterns, is free on Ravelry by Fickle Knitter, alias Michelle Miller. And the body of the shawl has 8 repeats of the main pattern. Then you knit on an edging, sort of going sideways around the live stitches at the big end of the shawl. So in other words, you don't end up binding off 400 stitches. What you do instead is you knit an edging onto them, and as you get to each edge, it's really hard to describe this in normal human terms. When you're doing the knitted on edging, you're at 90 degrees to the original pattern. So as you approach the live stitch at the edge, you join them. You'll figure it out. English has just failed me, which is embarrassing for a former English professor. In the meantime, the temperature blanket is my 4th project, and it's really happy, as I've been saying. It's up to date. I reached Saturday night after seeing my patients, looked at it, realized it was about 4 days behind there, or 3 days. And it was really fun just bringing it up to date. I am excited because I do have a shipment of more Knit Picks Brava coming, because it's really obvious that my yarn for the 50 degree range, the 60 degree range, and the 70 degree range is running out. So that's exciting, and it's really cheap. It's I think it's $2.69 a ball. I mean, this stuff, it's acrylic and it's sport weight. It's really, really inexpensive. So I'm very, very pleased with everything about my temperature blanket at this point. What am I currently wearing, you might ask? That is interesting. I've been wearing several different things lately, so I will just go to the pictures in the notes. And the first one is me wearing a wool end dress. That's actually a full-length dress, which I just adore. And wool end, they're about $100, $100 to $140, but they're wool. They're easy to manage, and they go with everything. They're a fantastic layer over leggings, under sweaters. So if you're wondering why my skirt and my sleeves are the exact same color, that's why. I'm wearing this sort of emerald green, full-length, swing-style wool end dress. Wool end is the word wool, .and, and. Okay, over that, I am wearing a cowl that I spun myself from a merino silk dyed by my friend Freckle Face Fibers, who is no longer dyeing. Wow, this is a real old one. I got this fiber at a cognitive fiber retreat probably around 2009 and spun it and just got a huge amount out of it and said, why is this sitting in my stash unloved? And so, of course, you know what I did. I calm-cowed it. I've still got a lot of it, so it's probably going to become mitts one of these days. I'm also wearing the Frances Revisited sweater, which I can't recommend enough. It is a turtleneck or a bit of a funnel neck, whatever you want to call it. Although you do the neck separate from the whole sweater. You do the whole sweater and then I believe you pick up stitches and add the neck. And you do it inside out so that it folds over to look like stockinette. It's a terrific pattern. I just love the fit I got on this one. It's on larger needles than I would typically use for this type of sweater. It's on size 9s and a worsted weight. So it has a looser gauge. Looks fine. Looks fine. I think if I had knitted it to my typical 5 stitches to the inch gauge, this thing would wear like body armor. But I love everything about this. It's in Malabrigo Rios, and the colorway is Aniversario, which is absolutely my favorite of their colorways. And I just love this thing. Okay, socks. I am wearing Forbidden Fibers, and I don't remember which yarn it is. It's her basic sock yarn. And it's in the Gryffindor colorway. I'm very fond of this because many people did just a straight up clean stripe with very sharp edges to each stripe. I like that Leanne did a more, for lack of a better term, smeary stripe. It is a stripe. It came out to gauge really well as a stripe, but it's not with real clean, tight edges. And I just love the kind of watercolor effect she got, and they look great. So those are my Gryffindor colorway socks from Forbidden Fibers. Dizzy Blondes, no real spinning action, although I'm getting excited about that electric eel wheel. I still have an electric eel nano. I need to break in. I'm just not in the place to spin. What can I tell you? I'm starting to look at my drop spindles longingly because, as I said a few weeks ago, I went through my older shawls and found that I had some of them that I spun on my drop spindle and double plied as lace weight, and they're fantastic and they're beautiful. The colors are beautiful. The knitting is beautiful. So I am getting kind of serious about seeing if I can get into this really super fine spinning, whether I spindle it or I do it on the Nano. When I spin on my electric eel Nano, it comes out incredibly fine. I'm not quite sure why it does, but I love that because it's a lot faster than spinning it on my drop spindle. And I have an Ashford e-wheel, and I love it dearly. I got that from my buddy Lexicom, the wonderful, wonderful crochet designer. And my spins on that come out less tight, and they come out as bigger yarns. When I spin on the Nano, it comes out super fine. So I know, I'm experienced enough as a spinster that I could fix that. I just don't want to. Instead, it's just more like I use this as a tool for ultra fine yarn, and this is a tool for less fine yarns. Anyway, I'm not in the spinning place, which leads me to go on to a strategy. Now, we've been talking about distress tolerant skills, and we've been using the acronym ACCEPTS, and you can go back to previous episodes to see what that acronym stands for. But the logic behind ACCEPTS is you accept that you are distressed, which means you're using a kind of radical acceptance there. You're acknowledging that you have to control yourself before you fix any problem. So I like accepts because it also teaches radical acceptance in a kind of subterranean way. That if you start using those skills, you're going to be using radical acceptance. The other important thing is you're going to notice, as I move on through the next set of skills, a lot of overlap. And that is important because we want it. It may seem very repetitive and redundant, but we want the overlap because you may hear me describe one skill in terms of accepts and say, no, but then a very closely related skill in the next acronym, improve, and say, no, that's what I do. So the deal here is to have as many available skills, and you may think they're overlapping, but then again, you may not, and you will notice the ones you habitually use. That's really important because we often miss the obvious here, which is when I am distressed, even though I know many of these skills, I don't feel able to use them. So the idea here is to bring your knowledge of the skills you use to your conscious awareness, to the level of articulation. Because once you do that, you will start memorizing these acronyms. And when your typical skills aren't good enough, you'll look at the other skills that you don't typically use. So for example, from accepts, my favorite skill to use, that I use instinctively, is the E skill, where I stop myself and say, before I can handle this problem, I have to handle my own emotion. What is my emotion right now, and how will I soothe it? I also am very fond of thought stopping by reverse serial sevens and of the S skill, sensory, of distracting myself by doing something sensory like going for a run or sniffing a candle or a strong scent. So the advantage here is now that I know that I use the E, the T, and the S of accepts, if I'm distressed, that means those aren't working. So I'm going to look at the other letters, like maybe I should do the C for contribute, bake a batch of brownies. Maybe that will settle me down a little bit. Or the C for compare. And remember that this may seem bad, but it was a lot worse last week when this other bad thing was happening. Whatever. The idea is once you bring your own skills to the level of your awareness and your ability to articulate what you typically do, you can then look at other skills when you feel your typical skills are not working for you, okay? Because not all skills work at all times. And this can be pretty obvious as I go forward here. So we've finished accepts. Now we're going to look at improve. The logic here is if you're distressed and you can't distract by using the accepts skills, then maybe you should focus instead on saying, okay, here I am at 10:43 on Monday, March 8th, 2021. I am going to focus on making this moment as good as it can be. Now, those of you who are clever just noticed that that was mindfulness. That, in other words, distracts works towards the idea of radical acceptance. I'm upset and I can work on it. Improve the moment works on the idea of I'm going to stay right here, focused right here and now, and try to fix whatever is going on here. That's very interesting because that takes you into the land of strategies for situations when you're trapped in the situation and can't get out of it. And you'll know that right away when I tell you that the I in improve stands for imagery. That you can use positive imagery to improve the moment. So, for example, let's say your boss is giving you a lecture. Your boss is having a bad day and they're taking it out on you. It happens. I had one of those very recently. Well, no, not in my current job, but when I was working in the job from Hades. And I learned to just look at the boss and say to myself, oh, this is someone who really doesn't know how to lead, who only knows how to bully. And I would just talk to myself, like, you can get through this. You've had bad bosses before. You already know your game plan. She needs to get this off her chest. So I would visualize myself succeeding. I would visualize myself tolerating the boss with a straight face without any kind of response. I would visualize myself doing well. I would visualize myself going back to my office, closing the door, making a hot cup of tea, and self-soothing. That you can use positive visualizations about your own success or your own safety, whatever you need to do, to get through a bad moment. I often teach this to kids. It's tough. You get a teenager in therapy and they've got a wonderful family and they're all convinced how their parents are mean and cruel because they're not letting them play video games nonstop. And there's really no way to win that one. That you're trying to talk to the teenager about, is it reasonable to play video games for 12 hours a day? And they'll tell you it is because they're an A student. And if they are, they really think that's justification. I'm doing my job, so my free time should be completely free. You can see where that logic is going to go in the future, and it's not good. It's my free time means I can go do sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever, as long as I pass my classes. So, you're trying to teach the kids that you can do better than this, but they're angry at their parents, and you're not going to win that one. That they just cannot understand at this point in their life why 12 hours at a computer is not healthy for them, okay? So at that moment, you don't argue with the kid. You just say, well, what can you do to improve the moment? And I'll have them do things like write across their parents' forehead in their imagination the words, be calm, or I can do this. And you're going to hear overlap when we get to the E with this. But even so, what we're doing is you use imagery. You imagine the words hanging in the air, I got this, I can handle this, or I don't have to get upset. I taught one kid, one of my most challenging cases was this 8-year-old who was determined to burn down the world. And I taught this kid to be a tree because I kind of hornswoggled him. He was fighting everything I did, and I said, well, you're right, nothing I do works. What I'd really do with you is hypnosis, but you're too young and you won't be able to do it, which of course made him demand hypnosis. So we did hypnosis, we did a simple tree induction, and he loved it. It calmed him down, and that was not typical for him. And so ever after, he was a tree, whenever things were bugging him in school. So I started getting phone calls from teachers saying, you did a really good job with David, not his real name, but can you tell me why when I'm talking to him, he sort of stands in one place and waves his body back and forth? And so, yeah, he's a tree. He's blowing in the wind, letting it all blow by him. So anyway, that's imagery to improve the moment. And as you can hear, it's a little bit of mindfulness, which is always a good thing. Put a lid on it. Now, going back to Loopy Uniter's post, for those of you who want to bake in keto, I really recommend The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking by Carolyn Ketchum, K-E-T as in Thomas, C as in cat, H, I can't remember if it's E-M or U-M. At any rate, there's a link in the show notes, so you can go there from the link, and it's in Amazon. I really, really recommend this book. It's just hardcore keto baking with a lot of good sense mixed in. When you bake keto, the advantage, you're not using sugar, which is great for your body, and it still tastes good. However, the keto flours of choice are nut flours, typically almond flour, and coconut flour. coconut flour is naturally sweeter. That's the downside, because that means it naturally has some carb content, but not that much. And it's really useful in baking because it imparts a certain sweetness, and it's more moist than the nut flours. So Carolyn Ketchum uses that in a lot of her baking. Now the brownies, which I love from this book, are almond flour, but the cookies are coconut flour. And she talks about how she searched high and low and realized it was going to have to be coconut flour. The other thing Carolyn Ketchum does is she uses powdered gelatin in her baking recipes to get a better level of chewiness and softness. It works really, really well. I just order it in bulk on Amazon. So you have to get used to those two ideas. The interesting thing is my son hates keto anything. He used to ask me, is that keto? Because then he wouldn't eat it. Well, he eats the keto chocolate chip cookies using unsweetened chips from Lily's. These things, none of this is cheap, I'll be honest. The good news about this, it may not be cheap, but it's really filling. Remember, keto is about healthy fats. So 2 keto chocolate chip cookies that are about 2 inches in diameter, you're full. That's all you needed. So it's like 1 keto brownie. If you can eat 2 keto brownies, you're more of a man than I am. And it's rather nice. My husband was saying the other day, you really don't eat very much. And I said, I don't need to. I'm eating a lot of fat. I'm very full all the time. So this is the ultimate guide to keto baking. There's one other advantage to Carolyn Ketchum's books. She's written a whole series of them. They're sort of everyday keto type books. The great advantage, she doesn't use really weird ingredients. Now, I apologize because I'm about to say that one of my other favorite cookbook authors does, but also she's doing non-mainstream American recipes. So I frequently find things in her recipes and I'm like, I have no idea where to even get that. I can't find it online. Okay, so keto sometimes gets blasted for this. It can be a little hard to find ingredients, but seriously, you can find them online. But Carolyn Ketchum goes out of her way to not go into the weird land there and to use much more typical ingredients. So I really recommend her books, and right now I'm recommending The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking, which I've already reviewed and recommended, but it's a good book. And my son, who hates keto baking, is eating the brownies and the cookies. Also this week, we went on the search for pink Himalayan rock salt. That we were using a brand called The Real Company Himalayan pink rock salt. Strangely, can't find it anywhere. We like it because it's sourced from a single mine and it's not sea salt. I used to love sea salt, I still do, except sea salt has been shown to have a fairly high plastics content now because the ocean is polluted. So if you take a sample of seawater and you dehydrate it for the salt, you're also getting plastic. It's really sad, So I'm using Himalayan pink rock salt. And I was surprised because I could not find the fine ground rock salt anywhere by The Real Company, except Walmart, which strangely will charge you $50 for a 6-pack. That's not strange. The strange part is, but then the shipping and handling is $102. So I finally gave up on it and went out yesterday, and that's where I transformed into the free-roaming feral vaccinated person. I had a little bit of a reaction to the vaccine, which was I went a little crazy and went everywhere. And I'll talk about that a little more in the blather. But I ended up at Cost Plus World Market, and there I found a bag of fine ground Himalayan pink rock salt, not by The Real Company and not guaranteeing it is sourced from one individual mine. However, beggars can't be choosers, so we have rock salt. But why do I care about this? Because of the plastics in most salts now. That most table salt now has a plastic content. I'm just not eating plastic if I can help it. Let's be real. That most salt is either from salt mines or from ocean salt. Salt mine stuff is usually mixed with ocean salt when you're just buying plain white table salt. So you're always going to have that risk of the plastics in it. So I'm going for the pure mined pink rock salt. It costs a little more, tastes a lot better. And then the next question, why is it pink? Because it has a high magnesium content. And I believe, I'm not absolutely sure, that it also has iron and or manganese in it. And these things will pink it out. I love the flavor. The other important thing is I'm keto. When you're keto, like when you're paleo, you're not eating processed foods. Well, Americans get a lot of their salt from packaged foods. And once you stop eating those, you're not getting electrolytes. So you have to up your electrolytes consciously. And one of the ways I do it, of course, is the good old-fashioned bone broth. Anytime we cook anything with bones, any meat with bones, it all goes into the pressure cooker, and out comes the lovely, lovely collagen and mineral and salt-loaded and electrolyte-loaded bone broth. But I don't eat bone broth every day, and so that's where the pink Himalayan rock salt is coming into the picture. If you're keto, you have to add salt. You have to eat salt. You have to. I don't have any problem with that. When I was growing up, we had salt licks out, and animals came from all around to enjoy the salt licks my father put out with them. It's a pretty normal mammal thing. By the way, if you're keto and you don't do this, you're going to have wild keto flu. Keto flu is usually about two things: not eating a sufficient level of healthy fat and not handling the electrolyte issue. Oh shoot, I continue to do the 30 minutes walking per day, although it doesn't always show up as an image on my feeds if I forget to turn on charity miles or whatever. And I'm working on the sleep project. You may remember that last week I said, hey, I'm not scoring sleep on my Fitbit the way I should be. Yes, I was wearing it too loosely. I tightened it up and my sleep improved this week, except for some reason this weekend I can't seem to sleep more than 5 hours. I don't know what's going on this weekend, if I over-caffeinated or what. Anyhow, though, by and large, the sleep project is going well. And again, my idea of sleep aids, I take 5 milligrams of melatonin, and I take magnesium twice a day, which really I could replace with a good Epsom salt bath, and the hot water as well as the Epsom salts would work better to put me to sleep. But I don't usually crawl into the bathtub at night. I don't often have the time. So those things are helping me sleep better. I've also cut back my caffeine, so I drink caffeinated once per day, and that's in the morning. I have a cup of rapid fire bulletproof coffee in the Keurig pod. Yes, they even dehydrate the butter and salt and put it in your coffee. And I love that stuff. And that's my one per day. I usually use Swerve as the sweetener, and it doesn't actually need a lot of sweetener though. So that's how the exercise program is going. I'm starting to have cravings to run, which is a lovely, lovely thing. So we'll see how that happens. In the meantime, something I really like, hair coverings and scarves and hair tools from Rapunzel. Rapunzel, the link is in the show notes. It's the word Rapunzel, spelled the way you think it should be spelled, with a W in the front to make the pun wrap, hair wrap. Rapunzel is a bunch of conservative, I think Orthodox Jewish ladies who cover their hair all the time, and instead of wearing wigs, decided they'd rather wear pretty scarves, which I think is a lovely idea. And what I like about the Rapunzel ladies is not all of them practice full coverage. Not all of them are Jewish. There are women of African descent who typically wrap for cultural reasons. And they also have conservative types like Mennonites who wrap for their own religion, which means you have people who just wear a big bandana. You have people who are wrapped completely, including covering their ears. You have people who show their ears and show the front of their hair and all sorts of things. And I really like it. They have all sorts of videos on how to hair wrap in different styles, how to accessorize it. It's really, really fun to look at. And they're very accepting and very supportive of women no matter where you come from. I discovered them a few years ago when I wanted to experiment with hair wrapping. I'm not really sure, when I look back, why I wanted to experiment with hair wrapping. This was probably about 2014 or 15. I just did. And I think it was because I was really into exploring my Amish heritage and was just thinking about what would that be like. And also, at the time, I had friends who were Islamic who were covering their head and were running into problems with that in American culture. And I started being interested in what is that like? I mean, what is the perspective of someone who feels they should cover their head? Now, I'm not going to advocate for it. I don't think a woman should have to cover her head. And I don't see it as a symbol of modesty. I'll be honest, it's hard for me because I see it as a symbol of patriarchal oppression. However, if you want to, oh, by the way, and cultural oppression, let's not forget the experiences of our African American sisters, particularly in the South where it was required in some states to prove your Africanness. Okay, so I have a lot of feelings about it. I don't want to insult the women who do it. That's your privilege. If you disagree with me on this point, you want to cover your hair, by all means. If you feel it shows you're modest and I'm not, by all means. I've actually found women who cover, though, remarkably unjudgmental. And I salute them. That it's their own personal ideology and more power to them. But I, at the same time, feel that I want to respect the cultures. There was a lot of discussion on the Rapunzel side of, is this cultural appropriation? And everybody's going to have a different take on it. My take is, well, it's in my culture because I had to cover my head to go outside and to go to church until I was about 7 years old. That was a typical part of being Italian Catholic. And on my mother's side, the Amish are still covering their heads. Does that mean because I'm part Amish, I have to wear a sunbonnet in the Amish style? Not in this lifetime, kids. It ain't happening. But without meaning disrespect, I think covering your hair is a fashion choice as well as an ethnic and religious choice, and you do what you want to do. I have to say that I learned a lot about wrapping from this one woman of African descent on the Rapunzel site who does really beautiful hair wrapping. I also am fond of the Israeli women who taught me on the site, how to wrap quickly, how to just basically use a tichel. Sorry, I can't do the glottal stop well there. And just cover up so you can go outdoors in a flash if you want to cover your hair. So having said all that, go look at Rapunzel. Also, they sell the most beautiful scarves, which they use as hair wraps and as scarves, and pashminas. And I just love pashminas in the winter as a hair wrap and as a scarf and a shawl. And they come very inexpensively on Amazon. So anybody who wants to cover their hair can do it. I was very moved back towards hair covering by Michelle Miller, who is very concerned about the health of a family member in the pandemic. And so when she goes out, she really covers up. And I realized, now that I'm vaccinated, I'm not likely to get sick, but I have to be careful not to infect the people in my household or people I'm running into in public. And I have long hair, and yes, your hair can cover COVID, as we've learned from dogs and cats that are carrying it in their fur. So the short end of this is, now that I'm vaccinated, I'm kind of roaming around more, and it feels really good. I hadn't realized how scared I was of this pandemic, and so being vaccinated has been kind of a relief. I'm acting like a normal person acts in the pandemic now, instead of being on utter lockdown quarantine. But I've decided, in the interest of health and safety in my home and in public, I'm covering my hair if I go into buildings, because I could be carrying it. And it's really easy to come home and take off your outer layer, which for me is usually a sweater, sometimes gloves, leggings, and socks, and turtleneck. And then just switch it out for new leggings, new turtleneck, or my pajamas if I'm home in the evening, and fresh socks. And it's easy just to take off the hair covering and not worry about washing my hair, because my hair is fragile and dry, as you know, and if I keep washing it, it keeps falling out. And at 60 years old, you're kind of worrying about your hair thinning. This all leads me to say, if you go to the show notes, you will see me in the process. I thought I would show you what it's actually like to do this. The reason I wanted you to see this is if you're going to wear a head covering, the biggest issue is how do you keep it on? They slide off your head. Your hair is not textured enough to hold on most hair coverings. Now you can just bobby pin it on, which I find annoying because I have thinning hair towards the front. Or you can use a velvet non-slip headband, which you can get at Rapunzel. These things are very inexpensive. They come in black, white, and brown. I've used the black ones and the brown ones. I like the brown ones a lot. They're somewhat darker than my hair, but they're about the closest. Now, you could wear these in public as just a hairband if you want, and it would work fine, although I don't really think they're that pretty. But these things work great under any kind of head covering, like if you're wearing a kerchief, a bandana over your hair. The other thing I got from Rapunzel, they had a sale on their tichel and their collection, and they had these two beautiful variations on lavender, with green and with stellina stripes in them. Thin, very, very thin stripes. And I just love them. And they go with almost everything I own, because everything I own is some shade of green or blue or purple. So I went out yesterday, and what I did was I took a large banana clip and clipped my ponytail up high on the back of my head. And that's what you see in the first picture. And then I put on the non-slip velvet headband, which has Velcro for a tighter fit, which I really like because you can adjust it a bit. They have different sizes of these, by the way, a small, medium, and large. I wear a large because I got a big head and a lot of hair. So I put on the non-slip headband, and then you can see over it, I put one of these tichels, and this one is actually somewhat larger than the more typical Israeli tichel that I started with several years ago that I bought. I bought these two slightly oversized ones a few weeks ago, and I just love them. They fit really nicely. You just tie it, you fold them into a triangle, and you just tie put the long end over your forehead and wherever you want it, and I line it up with the front of the velvet non-slip headband. And then I tie it under the ponytail, and then you have the triangular end sort of sticking out. And this time I just let it ride loose over my ends and down my back. And it's very pretty, and I deeply, deeply enjoyed it. So that's a lot of something I really like. But if you want to do an easy wrap, for whatever reason, you're walking through the woods and you don't want deer ticks dropping into your hair and giving you Lyme disease, or you're camping and you don't want to get junk in your hair, or you're going out into a COVID-infested universe and you want to protect people from yourself. But there you go. And now the blather. Well, as I said, I have transformed into a feral free-roaming person now because I have my 2 shots and I'm past the 2-week mark since I got my shots. Meanwhile, I also had a lot of fun this week managing my project page in Ravelry. I know, from the serious to the ridiculous. But I was thinking about it because I was trying to think about how I knit and who my project page belongs to. And a while back I made the decision it belongs to me, that I'm using it personally. I don't give access to it to everybody. And I'm using it to catalog what I'm doing and to think about my choices in projects and yarns and whatnot. And I'm one of these people. I don't like to have a lot of projects going. And I don't see any reason to. That, for me, that one of the worst things that ever happened was I was doing the Om shawl and I got stuck. It took me 8 years to finish the thing. And it really derailed me. That's not the way I work. I like to work quietly and consistently on projects and get them done in a relatively short amount of time. Because, when I work steadily on a project, I get more projects done. That's how that works for me. And I know there are people who don't think that way. I know there are people who feel like you have to have a lot of variety in your projects. I do, but I just stick to 4 basic projects. I don't even know how to describe why the number 4. Currently, what that means is 1 is a sweater, 1 is a pair of socks, 1 is lace knitting, and 1 is something random, often crochet or a really quickie project like a calm cow. But that system works for me, and the reason it works, I think, is that 1 project is socks, which go relatively quickly, and 1 project is usually designed to go quickly, like a calm cow or mitts or something. So, my take on this is when I need to get something finished, I do something small. And when I'm not in that place of needing to finish something, I go to my larger projects, or when I'm in something really dull, like I'm watching a movie or I'm in a meeting, I'll knit something that's mindless, like stockinette stitch. So I don't have any fancy recipe, in other words, about how many projects you should have in work in progress stage. I don't care. Do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. But I began to realize I have a lot of leftover yarn from the pandemic, where I've worked on a big project and just put aside the extra balls of yarn. I've been tending to overorder. Actually, I've been following the recipes, and I always tend to have a lot of leftover yarn. I can't explain that either, but I'm not complaining. So I have all these balls of really nice quality leftovers floating around, and I finally realized that I want to incorporate that into my projects page. So if you go to my projects page, you'll see I have the top row is the things I'm actively working on, And the row beneath it are the things I'm planning. Only one of them has a picture because I have the yarn for it. But the others have exciting names like Calm Cow or Ricky Hat, because I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'm debating it. But I'm really just putting those spaces there so I remember that, oh yeah, when I finish my socks, I probably can whip out one of these projects. Or when I finish my lace work on the wild lettuce leaf, I forget what it's called. When I finish my work on that shawl, I'll just whiz through one of these projects. That makes me happy because it gets the extra yarn out of my stash. It makes a gift that I can toss in the gifts bin or give to charity. And it gives me a fast finish. So if you're looking at my projects page, you will notice there's 6 boxes, one of which has some brown yarn in it, where they're not started. They're just listed there. And I already got rid of one of them. I was reverse engineering the Francis Revisited sweater to make it into a vest. But when I got success on my Pines vest for vestuary that I made for myself, I realized I don't need to reverse engineer anything. I found my vest formula, which also leads me to another embarrassing truth. I don't knit with a lot of variety. I'm really not that excited about finding a new pattern with interesting techniques. I cannot tell you how this shames and disappoints me about myself as a knitter. But to be honest, I knit because I want usable sweaters that I'll wear every day with a high ratio of success. I don't mind ripping back Twin Faces vest a few times for reasons I can't even explain, let alone guess at. But when I make myself a sweater, I've had very few bombs. But in fact, I've had no bombs. I've been able to wear everything I've made. I've had bad color choices, I can say that. But when I make myself a sweater, I want to be able to wear it. And I don't want to keep ripping back. And I also, as you can probably tell, don't want to just put it in timeout or in permanent whip status for years. Doing that with the Ohm shawl just about killed me. But I had to do it because, and I figured out this is my obsessiveness as a knitter. I messed up the Ohm shawl when I ripped it out the first time, and I broke stitches and all sorts of things. And I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't want to throw it out, but I didn't know how to mend it. And with experience, I've learned how to mend it. And I've learned probably I'll never block it because it's probably too fragile, but it's making a great day-to-day shawl to just wear around my neck. And I'm loving it. So no more 8-year projects. That's not for me. But I respect it if you work differently than I do. I don't think there's any advantage to either system. I think it's more what you're comfortable with. But what I'm really explaining is if you look on my page, you're going to see a lot of empty boxes, which probably looks strange. Now, if you have any sense at all, you're saying, but Dr. Gemma, why don't you use your queue on Ravelry? What a great question. I wish I knew. I tend to put things in my queue and just lose sight of them forever. And I could discipline myself to visit my queue, but I really don't think of knitting as involving discipline, you know? I think of it as involving fun and kickback and laid back. So I finally realized that for my leftover scraps, I'm probably just going to use this system. For larger projects that I'm going to make a yarn investment in, that is, I'm going to use a serious amount of yarn either from my stash or from an order, yeah, that's where my queue lives. And there's a lot of beautiful things like entrelac shawls, triangular shawls that I really want to get to and make, but I'm not in that place right now because I've got a ton of shawls. And the other thing that's embarrassing is I tend to make the same things over and over. Plain vanilla socks, plain vanilla vests, top-down raglan sweaters in no particular fancy design or with no particular fancy needlework technique. Now, since a few years ago, now about 10 or 12 years ago, I was very big into lace, which baffles me right now, although I do enjoy it for mindfulness knitting. So again, I figure this is probably a phase and I may come out of it. But right now, if you look at my Ravelry projects page, you can see my current phase of just saying, here are the blank boxes for the projects with spare yarn that I'm likely to do. So there we go. Okay, everybody, I've been talking enough. Oh, I did want to tell you, I have found a fun new series. Now, I like historical mysteries, and this series is about a medical doctor who's in the Roman army under Hadrian in Imperial Rome, because I really like that genre. And I will tell you the all-time best historical stuff I've read that involved Romans is the two series by Lindsay Davis. And I'll come back to them. The Didius Falco, I can't think of his daughter's name, that she's in the second series. Flavia Albia. Those two series are among my favorite historical mysteries. They're witty, they're intelligent, they're highly researched, they're very accurate, and they're very funny. And they also, as she writes more, they become more emotionally deep and interesting. However, I just discovered Ruth Downey, last name is D as in dog, O-W, N as in Nancy, I-E. Her series about a medical doctor, Gaius Petrius Russo, and he's in the outlands of Britain in the very beginning of Hadrian's reign, which, if you are at all familiar with classical history, Roman history, is going to make your ears prick up about what's going on in Britain in Hadrian's reign. He is situated in the fort that is now Chester, to the northwest of Britain, which happens to be a place that I know, which also makes me happy. So I'm enjoying those. I'm currently reading Medicus, the first book in the series. I really wasn't expecting much. I thought, Lindsay Davis ripoff. Well, I'll tell you, she's doing a good job. It's really, really a lot of fun. Okay, I need to put that in the show notes, but I keep thinking I want to tell you what books I'm reading. If you're wondering what my tastes are like, I like certain young adult fantasy because I really find sex scenes in novels tedious. Maybe I've just read too many. Maybe you get to a certain age where you go, meh. But I like, there's some excellent writers in young adult fiction out there. And I also like historical mysteries, the classic Brother Cadfael, of course. But Brother Cadfael, those are beautiful. They were coming out in the 70s and 80s mostly. I enjoyed them so much. I've read them all, but they're a little too cozy for me. There's a little more depth to the series I've been reading now. So anyway, I will hopefully be recommending books as I go if you're interested in that kind of thing. But my tastes, I have to tell you, I don't really swing as much with the popular tastes. So, maybe this is just another set of books to get you interested in, okay? And if you're reading other series, that's great. I have to tell you, I read fluff because one of the reasons I read fluff is I'm a psychotherapist. So if I want drama, I can go and talk to my patients. And this is the same reason I don't watch a lot of movies or television, is that I do drama and dramatic narrative all week long for my job. So watching a movie with high dramatic excitement to me is like going to work. So here, welcome to Dr. Gemma Does Fluffy Books. Maybe that should be a new segment, the Fluffy Book segment. Hey, that's good. Okay, maybe we'll do that because I think Offshoot's getting a little old. I don't have a lot to say about my exercise habits. If I get back into running, maybe I'll have more to say. So we have the Fluffy Book section. All right. So on that happy note, thank you so much for joining me. Please keep the comments coming. If you're interested in CFR, let me know. May you all get vaccinated soon. Please get vaccinated as soon as you can. Brace yourself. It's not easy to get an appointment, to get into the line, to wait. It's not a simple process. Now, some people it is. I've had people who just walked into their insurance provider and got vaccinated. But a lot of people, it's not working that way. So please hang in there. I wish you strength and I'm rooting for you. Please, in the meantime, wear your mask. Please wash your hands. Please social distance. But most importantly, please stay safe. Take care of each other. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.